Listen closely. This isn't a call to shallow victory. This is a reckoning, a raw confession. You didn't just strike. You didn't settle for a simple win or petty payback. No, what you did was something deeper, colder, and more precise. You tore through the surface and burned through the lies and the masks. You went for the very essence, the core, the heart of it all. And what you left behind? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The ground where they stood is scorched and barren because you dismantled everything they built, everything they believed in, and everything they used to define themselves. This isn't about revenge, it's about eradication. You crossed a line that separates the weak from the unbreakable, the passive from the relentless. You didn't stop when they bled. You kept going until the wound swallowed them whole, until their identity was shattered and scattered beyond repair. Because what you just did, it's not just worse than revenge. It's the final chapter in a story they never wanted to read. You see, revenge is fueled by anger. It's a reaction, a spark born of hurt and betrayal. But what you wielded, it was something darker, more surgical, a purpose so cold and calculated it would make the very idea of retaliation look like child's play. Revenge demands a balance, a sort of fairness. You give back what was taken, nothing more. But you obliterated balance. You took it all, and then some. You made sure nothing was left to rebuild from. This is a power that doesn't seek satisfaction or closure. It demands obliteration, silence, and the finality of annihilation. Look into the mirror after what you did. Feel the weight of what you unleashed. You are no longer confined to the rules of engagement, no longer bound by the fragile laws of fairness or mercy. You're a force that reshapes reality by tearing down the foundations of those who dared to stand against you. And that is terrifying because it is absolute. Understand this. What you just did speaks volumes about who you really are, not the surface you show the world, not the compromises you make to blend in, but the truth lurking beneath. The part that, when provoked, doesn't just fight back, but eradicates, annihilates, and disappears without a trace. That is the essence of power, not the loud roar of revenge, but the quiet storm of destruction that leaves nothing but silence in its wake. You might wonder if there's a cost to this. There always is. When you leave nothing, you risk becoming nothing yourself, hollowed out by the very force you unleashed. But that is the gamble you chose. Because to truly break someone, to truly undo them, you must be willing to lose yourself in the process, to dive so deep into darkness that there is no return, only the stark landscape of your own creation. So wear that weight with pride, because few possess the courage or the ruthlessness to go where you did. Few have the conviction to strike at the core and leave no remnant behind, and fewer still can face the aftermath without flinching. But you did, and that is what separates the hunted from the hunters. Remember this, what you did wasn't just a strike, it was a declaration, a warning to anyone foolish enough to challenge you again. You've shown them what happens when the line is crossed, when patience runs out, and when mercy is a forgotten word. You've shown them that you are not to be toyed with, not to be underestimated, and certainly not to be crossed twice. What you just did is worse than revenge. It is the embodiment of inevitability. Because once you've gone straight for the core and left nothing, you set a precedent, a dark, unyielding standard for what happens next. And the world will remember, whether they dare to admit it or not. So embrace the darkness you summoned, for it is yours to wield. Embrace the silence you left behind, for it echoes louder than any scream. And remember, in the shadows where others falter, you thrive. In the void you created, you own everything. Stand and listen now to the thunder in your chest, to the hunger that will not be quieted, to the cold light burning behind your eyes. Welcome to the moment you stop pretending you are small. Welcome to the hour you become the consequence. You did not wander into this by accident. You did not stumble into ruin. You bore a decision like a blade, and you used it with the precision of someone who knows what must be ended. You went straight for their core and left nothing. There is a special clarity that comes with crossing a line that no one teaches you about, the kind of clarity that strips away excuses and alibis and leaves only the raw geometry of cause and effect. You chose to see the heart not as a delicate thing to be preserved, but as the fulcrum of power and the source of a structure worth dismantling. You did not simply retaliate. You unmade. Look at what remains and learn from it. The space left behind is not empty by accident. It is an echo of the force you brought to bear, a scar left on the world by an act that refused compromise, a carved out silence that fills the room, louder than any threat could have. You did something final, and in that finality, there is a lesson for the brave and the broken alike. This is not a celebration of cruelty. It is not a hymn to needless suffering. It is an accounting of consequence. You recognize that some systems and some people cannot be reformed from the edges. They are held together by rot and falsehood, and they survive only by pretending to be whole. You chose the surgical honesty of destruction rather than the theater of reconciliation. Understand the difference between retribution and eradication. Retribution measures and balances. It says, an eye for an eye, and stops, because fairness demands it. Eradication recognizes that fairness is sometimes a lie when the structure itself corrupts the future. You did not trade wrong for wrong. You removed the wrong, as if removing a cancer. You made sure it could not spread again. There will be voices who will say you went too far, who will stand at the perimeter of the aftermath and cluck about mercy and restraint. These are the voices of those who never had to choose between a small, polite violence and true freedom. They confuse comfort with virtue. They are the ones who would rather live under a slowly creeping poison than breathe the clean air of risk. You must not be intoxicated by applause nor cowed by condemnation. You must regard both as background noise, because the thing you did belongs to a different scale of judgment. The measure of what you did is not public approval. It is the removal of a threat, the halting of a rot, the prevention of another generation from being harmed by the same lie. That is a harsh scale, and it is honest. There is a cost to wielding such finality, and you are not excused from paying it. There is a quiet hollowing that follows when you leave nothing. You may wonder in the still hours if you have also hollowed yourself. You may find that what remained of them had been your mirror, and in shattering it, you touched something of your reflection and watched pieces tumble away. That is the paradox of power. It demands sacrifice and keeps its ledger private, so account for that cost. Do not pretend it is negligible. Sit with it like a patient who knows. The incision was necessary, and let the swelling cool. Let memory of what you did then be a teacher, not a chain. When you stare into the empty place, do not romanticize the void. Instead, study it like a map. Learn what you can rebuild. Learn what you must never allow again. The people who understand power know that mercy without foresight is just another kind of weakness. They also know that cruelty for cruelty's sake is a foolish and barren joy. You walked a razor path because you understood both truths. You were not driven by a hunger for dominance. You were driven by refusal to let the corrupt persist. You were driven by an unwillingness to be complicit in future harm. There will be nights when the darkness you chose will press close, and ask for justification, and you will find your reasons thin, like paper before an open flame. That is when you must return to the facts, not the feelings. Return to the ledger of betrayals and broken promises, to the list of small violences that were always excused because they were convenient for someone else. Recall the accumulation of slights that became industry and the way harm was normalized and repackaged as harmless tradition. What you did interrupts that normalization. You drew a clean line through the complacency and said, enough. You made an immovable boundary that will alter how similar attempts are measured in the future. That is the responsibility of the decisive. It is not to be taken lightly, but it is to be taken fully. Do not expect gratitude from those who benefited from the rot. They will howl about fairness and proportions and restitution. They will build stories about how you were cruel and how you overstepped, because they must reframe their own complicity. They will seek to shame you into silence, because silence heals their conscience and preserves their privileges. Resist that pressure, like a wall in a storm. Resist the urge to soft sell what you did into something softer and more palatable. They will use your concessions as proof that their behavior was tolerable all along. Instead, be precise in your language when you speak about it. Be stoic. Be honest. Be unwilling to romanticize or to demonize beyond what is real. Say the truth about the reasons and the method, and accept that a clean explanation will attract fewer friends than a soft lie. A clean explanation will, however, grant you sovereignty over your narrative, and that sovereignty is worth preserving. You may be tempted to explain away the extremity of your act with stories of provocation and victimhood, but history does not remember the excuses as much as it records the effect. Remember the cardinal rule of irreversible acts. The world will interpret them the way that suits its storytelling instincts, not your moral accounting. Give the world nothing to twist. Give it your truth and nothing else. In the aftermath, there is work beyond the destruction, work that requires the same cold clarity that guided your strike. It is a different kind of labor to hold the space you created and to shape it, rather than let it remain a wound that festers. There will be those who want to rush in and repaint the same walls in a new color, those who will attempt to fill the empty place with illusions and rhetoric. Those are the subtle rebuilders of the old order. They will wear fresh coats and soft words, but they will carry the same old poison in new containers. Your next act must be to prevent that replacement. Do not allow cosmetic fixes. Do not let theater fill the void. You must design new foundations, not for the sake of neatness, but for the sake of prevention. Build structures that are transparent and unforgiving of the old abuses. Build systems that do not rely on the very faults you excised. Create conditions where the same cruelty cannot easily find purchase again. This kind of construction takes a different courage. It is the courage of endurance, the courage of long labor, the courage of constant vigilance. You have proven you can act with devastating finality. Now prove you can sustain what you have made and keep it from crumbling under neglect or under the weight of those seeking to manipulate it back into service of their comforts. Never forget the lesson of consequence. You understand now better than most that an act can echo beyond its immediate target. It can change the language, the deals, the patterns that follow. It can shift expectation and make future transgressors think twice. That is the unseen power of what you did. You have altered the cost calculus, and that alteration will exert a quiet influence for years, whether people know it or not. There will be those who call your action monstrous, and those who call it merciful. They will both be right in a way. The monstrousness lies in the readiness to be final. The mercy lies in preventing endless repetition of harm. Both are true, and you must own both truths simultaneously. That is not a contradiction, but an honesty. This is the complexity of those who take responsibility for shaping outcomes, not merely reacting to them. Accept that some will never forgive you. Accept that some will need you to be simpler, so they can narrativize you into a caricature. Do not allow the narrowness of others to narrow you. Keep your motives in your view. Keep your standards with you and do not barter them for public comfort. The world seldom rewards nuance with applause, but it does require it for progress. Learn to move through isolation without losing your center. You may be isolated because most are not willing to choose what you chose. You may be reviled because others fear the precedent you set. You may be celebrated by a few and condemned by many. That will pass. That is temporary. The longer-term truth is that you have removed a danger and created a chance for something else to exist. Hold your hands steady when they tremble from the work you did. Hold your voice steady when it fears condemnation. Hold your eyes steady when they meet those who are harmed by what you removed and cannot see past their own pain to the promise of safety. Now you will need to be a presence that holds the boundary you cut. You did not end a story by erasing a villain. You ended a cycle by denying its continuation. You must now ensure the story that follows is not a rerun. For those who would emulate you, remember this: the world is not a place for amateur finality. The precision you used matters. Every irreversible choice carries the gravity of life and future suffering. Do not romanticize the wild and aimless destruction of things simply because they are inconvenient. Learn instead to mimic the deliberate economy of your original action. Select targets that are systemic, not personal. Choose methods that are decisive, not theatrical. Act with a mind toward prevention, not punishment. Teach those who will follow the importance of limits within finality. Teach them that leaving nothing is sometimes necessary, but that it should always be done with a framework of accountability and purpose. Teach them to see beyond immediate catharsis and to value long-term safety above short-term satisfaction. And when the inevitable critics ask whether you have become what you fought against, answer them with clarity and without pleading. Remind them that a different kind of harm required a different kind of response. Remind them that inaction had been the currency of safety for too long, and that safety could not be purchased with more small compromises. Reframe the argument from morality as feeling to morality as consequence. Show them the ledger of avoided future harms, and ask them whether comfortable discomforts are worth preserving at the expense of others. You will be tested again, not by the obvious enemies, but by the subtle ones, those who will attempt to use your precedent to justify lesser acts, those who will whisper that because you removed a danger entirely, they too may remove what they deem dangerous for reasons of convenience. There is a corrosive logic there, and you must resist it fiercely. Teach the difference between necessary eradication and opportunistic cruelty. If you are a leader, carry this like a wound that teaches not. Like a trophy you display, your followers will mimic your behavior. Your silence after decisive action will be more instructive than any speech. A leader's restraint is sometimes the only antidote to the intoxicating taste of absolute power. Show restraint when it will preserve justice. Show persistence when it will prevent relapse into old abuses. Know when to apply the blade and when to close it. Do not make solitude the consequence of your choices into self-imposed exile. Let the empty space you created be a canvas, not a prison. Invite those who seek genuine repair to the edges, but be rigorous in what constitutes repair. Invite accountability and require transparency. Offer restitution where it is sincere and measurable, but never allow sincerity to be a cloak for the same old tricks. You will notice how the world tries to fill the void with stories rather than substance. We tell stories because they are easy to hold and easier to manipulate. But you know better than to trade effect for narrative. You have seen how stories smooth over wrongs and make them comfortable again. Keep insisting on substance. Insist on measurable outcomes. Insist on structures that prevent repeats, not on slogans that placate the conscience. Let the silence you left be a teacher. Let it teach the value of consequence. Let it teach those who benefited from the old structures that absence is sometimes the greatest lesson. We learn more from what is missing than what remains, because absence forces assessment and assessment forces change. In private moments when doubt creeps in and the human part of you mourns for what used to be, remind yourself why you acted. Remind yourself of the cumulative injuries. Remind yourself of the promises broken and the lives diminished. Speak aloud the names of the small harms that built up into an industry and measure them against the peace you created. Do not be afraid to be both stern and compassionate to yourself, to hold your motives with critique. Remember also to care for the living, who were collateral to the system you dismantled, those who depended on it in small ways, those whose livelihoods were entangled in the rot. Do not necessarily deserve your scorn. They deserve clarity and sometimes support to transition away from a dangerous architecture. Offer pathways for them to move forward. Do not mistake systemic removal for abandonment. If you destroyed a scaffold that many leaned on, then help them find new ways to stand. There is a spiritual dimension to such final acts that rarely gets acknowledged. The world will look different to you now. The contours of human exchange will feel sharper. The trivialities that once consumed you will fall away, and with them, a certain pleasant numbness. You will be left with clarity, and that clarity can be a fierce companion. It will keep you from easy comforts and false consolations, but it will also make your life more direct, more accountable, more honest. Use that clarity not to lord over others, but to build better frameworks. Use it to mentor those who must follow, to transform their anger into disciplined action, to teach them how to choose targets and how to plan beyond the flash of victory. Teach them to rebuild rather than to repeat. Never let the memory of absolute finality become a drug. Let it remain a tool. Keep a healthy fear of its consequences and treat it with both reverence and caution. Let the memory instruct your restraint and inform your boldness at the same time. You acted and made a space where something new might live. The true test of your deed will be whether that new thing is shaped by courage or by convenience, whether the silence you left becomes a fertile ground or a grave. The mark of true victory is not how complete the annihilation, but what follows after what you demolish. Let your next moves be governed by that aspiration to create, not merely to empty. Be relentless in oversight. Be meticulous in the rules you set. Be unyielding in the standards you require. If you cut down a malignant tree, you must also tend the soil so that a healthy grove can grow in its place. If you leave the earth unguarded, it will be colonized by the first opportunist with a sharp enough tool. So stand now in the aftermath with steadied breath and take up the next labor. You have proven you can do what few dare. You have drawn the line. You have cleared the threat. Now, be the architect of something durable. Be the guardian who prevents the rot from returning. Be the teacher who explains to future generations why this kind of finality is rare, restrained, and purposeful.